Hello there, it's Cassie. Happy Wednesday and welcome back for the second time today. I'm over on the Brutus Monroe blog and I am going to be making another fall card. Today I'm going to use the stamp set called Autumn Essentials, but before we get into that I want to work on my background. I have some ARTEZA expert watercolor paper and I am going to just do some ink smushing with a piece of acetate or some packing paper or whatever you might have, along with some distress oxides. And I'm starting off with the color Evergreen Bough. And I just smushed that right onto that piece of acetate, and then I spritzed it with some water, and then I put it all over my background, just on that lower left-hand corner. Now I'm going to go in with some peacock feathers and do the same thing. And I'm taking my finger because I want that edge to be a little bit more organic, because I did notice that just putting it down, it looks like a square, and I didn't really want that. So I'm heat setting it in between each of the colors. But one of the things I love about the Distress Oxide inks is that they layer on top of each other, so you end up with this really neat effect. So I'm going to go in one more time with that Evergreen Bough, spritz it with some water, get those edges to be a little bit more organic, and then kind of stick that down. And that'll soften up all those edges that I had underneath. And so I'm also going to end up taking each of my ink pads, just putting a little bit down onto my glass mat. So both of those colors. Then I'll take a paintbrush with a little bit of water on it, and then I'll sprinkle that all over. You really can't see it here, but it does add just a little bit more sprinkle to the card base, or the card panel. Once again, I'm going to heat set that just to make sure that I have it all completely dry. And then I'm going to take that and put that inside of my makeshift splatter box and use some of this Frost Shimmer Spray. I'm going to spritz that all over that piece, because I want to make sure that that is super shimmery. So take a look. I mean, you can sort of see it here. It is very, very shimmery. I do apologize, I didn't get on camera the actual stamping, but I stamped out these images from that Autumn Essentials stamp set onto some Express It cardstock. I stamped that using some Brutus Monroe Raven Detail ink, and now I'm going in with my Copic colors. That first color, I'll put those up on the screen later, but right now I'm just putting down my lightest color, and then I'm adding some shading into my darker areas. For the one pumpkin, I'll use those same colors for the other pumpkin, but then for my gourd I use E81 because I wanted it to be more of a, one of those white pumpkins. I think those are so cool. And then I use my E84. That ends up being a little bit dark, but I do soften that out a little bit by using my E81, so that makes it a little bit better. And then I use, so the colors that I use are YR23 for my softer layer color, and then I go back in with YR27 as my darker shade. And then once again, when I'm done with that, I'll go back in with my lighter shade and soften up those edges just a little bit. These are smaller images, so you don't need to go too crazy with color if you don't want to. My stems, I use E87. And then to do something a little bit different to sort of match my background, my leaf color, I'm going into the blue-greens. So I start with BG57, and then my darker shade is actually BG18, and then I do it for both. I fussy cut those out, but now I want to see if my background is dry enough. So I'm going to take my embossing powder that I plan to use and put it over the top, and as you can see, it is not dry, which I'm glad that I checked that, because if I had just gone in like I normally do, I would have had problems. So I went back over it then with my embossing bag, still not dry. So I wipe all that off, put that away, and then I'm going to heat set this really, really well. Now the embossing powder that I'm using is from Brutus Monroe. It's called Gilded Sparkle Embossing Powder, and it is gorgeous. Oh my goodness, it's gorgeous. I could emboss all the things with it. I'm going in with the September stencil of the month, along with some embossing ink, and I'm going to take a mini ink blending tool and just kind of pounce that embossing ink around. Now, because I did use Distress Oxides, it can be reactivated. As you can see that under there, it sort of reactivated that, but that's okay because I'm going to cover that with my embossing powder. And I did want it to be, as I said before, organic edges, so I didn't go all the way to the edges of the stencil. And then I'm just going to funnel all my embossing powder back in there because I don't want to waste a drop of that embossing powder. It's awesome. Love it. So, so pretty. And I'll show you the sparkle here later on. And then I'll put the lid on it And then we are going to heat set that embossing powder. And you'll be able to tell, you can see it sort of change, it melts. You don't want to over melt it, but you definitely want to make sure that you have it all melted. So you can hold it up in the light and you'll be able to tell where it's a little darker and where it's a little lighter. So the lighter areas are where it's melted nicely. And so then I'm going to hold this up for you so you can kind of get an idea after I trim it down. So I'm going to trim this panel down. It started out as a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel. So now it is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So that way when I put my base down, which is some lunch bag cardstock from Brutus Monroe, which I had cut down to 4 1/4 by 11 inches and scored it at 5 1/2 inches. Now when I put that on top, you're going to have a little bit of a border. So take a look at the shimmer on there. I'll even grab my phone and turn on my flashlight so you can kind of get a look at the sparkle and the shimmer that you can see here. Isn't that stunning? It's just, oh my goodness, love it. Just love it. All right, so moving on, we're going to get ready to start assembling all of our pieces. So I'm just going to use some liquid glue to adhere my panel down to my base. And then I'm going to start, looking at the placement of where I want my actual pumpkins in my gourd. For my sentiment, I did use the Tree of Thanks. This is an awesome set because it says thank you in so many different fonts. And so I love that set for that. And I pulled out some heat-resistant vellum from Brutus Monroe. And then I'm going to use my magic powder bag on that, ink up my thank you with embossing ink. And then I'm actually just going to cover that with some Alabaster embossing powder. I thought about doing the gold, but I thought that might be a little too much since this is on vellum, and the point of using the vellum was so that you could see that pattern through it. And so then I'll heat this till that is smooth and melted, and it doesn't take long. And then I'm going to trim down my panel just using my paper trimmer. So I'll just stick that in there, trim it down, and I'll even trim down one of the other edges, and then we're going to be ready to start adhering. So because this is vellum and it's see-through, I decide to use some multi-medium matte adhesive, and I'm just putting it right behind the words thank and you, so that way it'll stick. But I do put it on that one end because that's where the pumpkins and gourds are going to go, so you won't be able to see that anyway. And then it holds really nicely. I'll use that same multi-medium matte on the back of my gourd to adhere that down. And then I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of both of my pumpkins. So I'll peel off the backing paper and I'll put each of those down. And it's okay that it covers up that one part of the thank. I'm okay with that because I really want the focus to be those pumpkins and that background. And then for a final bit of embellishment, I'm going to grab some Nuvo Dream Drops in the color Dragon Scales. And I went liberal with these. I put them small drops, big drops. I just went crazy putting drops all over that area because it matched so beautifully with that background. Oh, I love that soft mint kind of look. And it just, I know that's not necessarily fall, but for whatever reason, this all just screamed super fall to me. And that's going to end up finishing off the card after I tap down those Nuvo drops. I love how this turned out. So as I typically do, I will have all the items that I use listed down below in the description box. I really appreciate all the love and support that you guys give by liking and subscribing my videos and even using my affiliate links. So thank you guys. So head on over to the Brutus Monroe blog as well. Check out what we've been up to over there. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by.